Hey there, Emma from Paint Wild, and in this video we're going to talk about color schemes and how to use your color wheel to actually choose those color schemes for your paintings. So whether you're really stuck on choosing colors from scratch or whether you've got a subject in mind but you'd love to know what to use for a background that'll complement it really well, this video will help you. A color wheel is more than just something fun to hang on the wall or an interesting activity to try. Not only can it help you with choosing color schemes for your paintings, but it can also help you avoid muddy colors as well. So I'm going to take you through different names for different color schemes, what they are, and how you use your color wheel to select them. I'm going to show you what those colors look like together with not really a painting of anything in particular, just, watercolor circles placed together. But then later in the video, I will show you some watercolor wildlife portraits from my collection that utilize those color schemes, so you can just get a bit more of a sense of how they look in an actual painting. We're now going to take a closer look at what some of these color schemes look like, not really painting anything in particular. These are just circles, but it is a really fun activity that I would love for you to try. So the aim here is that you're painting circles next to each other that touch, and what you want to do is, this is great for learning water control as well, is you ideally want to be getting these beautiful soft blends and bleeds. It's okay if you make some little blooms, but it teaches you a lot about water control, how quickly you need to touch something with another thing to make it blend. And it's also going to teach you just a little bit about creating contrast with dilution. So in some of these mixtures, I used full strength paint, then I touched it with water, and that color just kind of soaked in there and made a much lighter version. And this gets particularly helpful when we get into color schemes that have way more colors in them, because you can see how much the contrast of those colors affects whether something looks balanced or not. For instance, these two are the same colors used, but here I was really punchy and saturated with a lot of the colors, whereas here I was more picky and choosy with which colors I made really saturated, or where I placed them so that there was enough dilution in between them to balance them out. So, just keep in mind that just because you have, 4 colors in this example that are making part of your color scheme, you don't need to use them at their full strength. The beauty of watercolor is that we add water to dilute them, and all of a sudden we get all these extra shades in between. The first color scheme that we're going to dive into is super duper easy. It's monochromatic. So this is just one color. Nice and simple. You can simply select any color from your color wheel and you paint the whole portrait with only that. You might be thinking, how on earth do you actually do that? But I'll show you a painting later on in this video where I painted a very colorful little bird in just one color, and you can still make things look realistic. And I often find that painting things monochromatically teaches me a lot more about the subject, because you really have to focus on the values. And what that means is the lightnesses and the darknesses of the painting that you then use your watercolor to achieve and match up. So you can see from just this little swatch on the screen of one color, I'm still able to achieve different values because we dilute it. Even if you don't like painting an entire portrait monochromatically, it can still be really helpful to do what's called a value study before a painting, and that's where you basically sketch it out with just one color and focus on the lightnesses and the darknesses and the highlights and the shadows to help your final painting become more realistic. Because sometimes when you sit down to paint something and you've got colors involved and you're mixing and you're trying to make the thing look like it should, you forget about the shadows and the highlights a little bit, and that can really take away from the realism. So value study can be really handy. The one thing I'll mention about monochromatic paintings is sometimes it's really going to depend on the color, how well you can achieve a monochromatic look. I will show you an example in this video of 2 colors where one of them just isn't able to achieve the depth of color that the other can. So it's not going to produce this massive range of values where you can just get a ton of different tones from it. It'll actually look really flat even if you're using it at full strength. And I think that that's something that can be hard to wrap your head around when you're getting started, is that saturation doesn't equal intense value. So hold tight for that. I'll turn the screen black and white as well so you can actually see what I mean by that. But this one is super duper easy. So if you're just getting started and you just want to start playing around with color and learning a bit more about values and realism, give a monochromatic painting a go. It is a really fun challenge. The next one is complementary, and I have to say this is my absolute favorite color scheme. I use it probably more than any other because it is just so simple. So whenever I have a main color in a portrait, I'm always looking to add its complement somewhere in there there to play off well with it. To find your complementary colors, all you have to do is look opposite that color on the color wheel. So here on the screen, I've got yellow and violet. One thing that's really important to note about complementary colors though is even though they're called complements and they should work really well together, sometimes when you use them both at full strength, they fight for attention. So if you look for two really saturated circles on this little picture, then you might think, oh, that's a bit too much. But when you put them all together and some are light and some are dark and more saturated and some have got lots more water in them, it just looks a lot more peaceful. But what is also important to note about complementary colors is they neutralize each other, which means when you mix them together, they're gonna turn brown or some kind of dirty, neutralized, non-bright color. And I love them for that too though. Like I am always going for blue and mixing up an orange and creating a brown. That is my go-to mixture for everything. All my students would tell you. And so I love complementary colors for both reasons. I love them for creating all my neutral colors, and we'll definitely cover that in a future video, but I also love them for just working so well together. And I'll take you through some paintings and how I use this color scheme later in the video. So another area that complementary colors come in handy for is for shading things. So not just using them to be a fun other color to contrast in your paintings, but shading actual objects with them. So I want to show you here, and I will turn this footage black and white in one section just so you can see what I'm talking about. But some colors, they just don't offer the depth or the range of values that others do. So with our Gouldian Finch, we can see so many values that we can achieve from just that one color that allows us to make something really realistic without actually using the correct colors for it, because we just have so much depth within that one shade. But some colors, particularly lighter colors, but not always, they just don't have that range of values in there. So if we end up using that color to shade itself, it's just not going to get realistic enough. We're not going to get the depth that we need. So what we can do is shade it with something else. So, here we have shading with analogous colors, so using yellow and then shading with, kind of orangey red colors. Here we have using the complement, and this could be a brighter yellow for sure. It's definitely not meant to match that, but using purple to shade here, and using complementary colors to shade the original color is just often such a great way to do things, because shadows aren't just black. Like you don't want to just shade something black, because shadows have colors in them, and this way is kind of like a cheat kind of guarantee that it's going to work well, because it's the complements that complement each other. Or you could use something like a neutral tint. So that is actually the name of this color. It's from Winsor and Newton, and the whole idea behind it is that it can tint the colors that you're working with without giving them any other kind of crazy biases. But for me, I'd rather stick to something like this. And we'll definitely go into this in another video about mixing neutrals, but you can, from the primary colors, mix up a beautiful black and all of these neutral colors, of which you can get a large spectrum depending on how much of one is in it, the mixture versus the other. But when you mix these two colors together and these, you can get a range of neutrals and browns. So knowing how to use the complements can come in handy for a whole range of things. One other little thing I just want to mention about complementary colors and, just color mixing in general that we haven't really touched on yet, but I just want to let you know we will touch on, is color temperature, because that can drastically impact the outcome of your mixes. And I figured just the better place to have that discussion is in a video on split primary palettes, where you have a warm and a cool version of each primary color. So we will definitely cover that in future. A variation on the complementary color scheme is the split complementary color scheme. And basically that just means taking one of your complementary colors, and instead of choosing the one opposite its complement on the other side of the wheel, you actually choose the two on either side of its complement. So very easy to understand when you see the diagram. Another color scheme I really love is the analogous color scheme, and this is where you select colors that are all just next to each other on the color wheel. It doesn't matter which way you go, but I am very partial to blue greens and blue violets. They're kind of my favorite go-tos. I don't really like yellows, oranges, and reds, but you might, and these colors just work amazingly together. Like staring at these little watercolor bubbles on the screen in those colors just make me so happy. So it doesn't have to be 4, it doesn't have to be 2, it could be as many or as few as you like. I have paintings where I'm basically using half the color wheel that are all next to each other. It's totally up to you. And then we have another take on both the analogous and the complementary color scheme, and that is analogous complementary scheme. So basically 2 colors that are complements on either side of the color wheel, but then the colors next to them on one side. So in this example, if this was a split complementary, we would be going yellow, green, violet, and red, but instead we're going yellow, green, violet, and red. And I do really like this color scheme as well. I think it's beautiful. Another color scheme which is really fun and quite simplistic is the Triadic, where you are choosing 3 primary colors that are like a triangle distance apart. So think your primary colors, yellow, red, blue, they're equal distances apart. Or in this example, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, violet. I have seen different interpretations of the Triadic color scheme where they think just like any kind of triangle is fine. So for instance, yellow, green, yellow, orange, violet, that could still create like a very thin triangle between those, and that still counts. Whereas to me, that one is the split complementary color scheme. I've also seen people interpret color schemes as, well, you know, you can grab the colors that are in the color scheme, but then you should be allowed to create any other color mixture with those colors to fit within the scheme. But a saying that I read recently and that I am just like fully behind is, it's not color fact, it's color theory. So, you know, you can just go with whatever theory you like and whatever works best for you. And then we have Tetradic, which is like a square. So basically you can pick 2 complementary colors and then just choose the 2 colors on either side of those 2 colors. Digging through my paintings though, I don't think I had a single example of this one in an actual painting, but you know, if you are choosing to paint things that aren't from real life and you do need to decide on colors, these are just great ways that can help you select what to use that'll work well together. But I've said this in a previous video, when you are mixing from just 3 primary colors, you do have that added benefit that they're all going to relate back to each other anyway, so they should turn out more harmonious regardless. But you know, if you are someone who wants to grab 12 different colors to create your color wheel, then these might be really helpful for you to know which ones to go with. Let's now take a look at some of my actual wildlife paintings that utilize these color schemes and have a bit of a look at what they look like. So first, let's look at monochromatic. This is when we are completing our painting with a single color. And as you can see here from this little value chart created at the top, I believe this was Payne's Gray, you can still get a lot of different colors from just one simply by diluting it. Now, we're going to dive more into values and a value chart in the next video, but it's something that I found, it was just so profound when I realized that you can still paint something that looks realistic or as it should without color. All you need to do is get the values correct. So as much fun as we're having learning about color and color theory and color mixing, values are really important as well. So here we have a Gouldian finch, which if you Google are very, very bright birds, all painted one color. A similar thing here where I was demonstrating the importance of values, a little Frenchie, all painted with just one color. Again, I do have an affinity for Payne's Gray. I've got here a gorilla. Believe it or not, I actually mixed that color. Not the eyes though. Can you actually see the difference? I used Mars Black for the eyes, but I mixed my own black for the skin and fur, and there is a difference there. There's a little bit of another color on this one, but here we have a whale and a zebra as well. This one I did actually use all Mars Black for, which I wouldn't do these days. This is quite an old painting, but I do love it for the granulation I got on the muzzle. Next is my biggest collection of paintings that fall under a color scheme, and that is complementary. So this is where we are utilizing colors from opposite sides of the color wheel to work well with each other. So here we've got green and red being the tongue really. I mean, there's obviously browns and other things in there as well, but we've got the beautiful color of the tongue and all the green of the gecko. Now, what I usually find with using complementary color schemes though is you don't want to go too intense with both of the colors, otherwise they can clash and fight a little bit. On this sea turtle here we have orange and blue. I mean, this could potentially be split complementary as well, you know, there's greens and blues in there and kind of yellows and oranges, but I absolutely love this painting and I love the splashiness of it, and we really play up one color or the other. So here I've gone really intense with the shell color, but then I've really made the blue a lot more diluted in the background so they're not fighting. Now this is a recent painting I did of an Arctic fox, and you might be thinking, what are you talking about, complementary colors? Well, you can see the yellow in the tail here and just a little bit in the fur where the light source is hitting. So making those nice and warm and the shadows nice and cool. And obviously yellow and purple are opposite on the color wheel. I want to show you my first iteration of this so you can see how wrong it can go. Okay, look at this guy. Now, I actually loved the depth of it. Like this one, I feel like I could have potentially gone deeper in the background, and I really liked it on this one, but it just feels so heavy and so cold here. So you can really see the difference. I didn't put as much purple in the shadows on this one. I really kept it to more of a kind of cool gray color because it was just too purple. I had the same issue with the tail here, and you know, the yellow was just a bit too intense and I wanted it to be a bit more subtle. So even when you have a color scheme, it doesn't always mean it's going to go to plan, and I really just like didn't adjust the values correctly on this one either. It just went all too dark, and that's why I had to go so dark up here and so dark in the shadow. Whereas here I could pare it back a little bit because I didn't go so intense on the animal. This one is a much more subtle one. This is a panther where the black color is mixed and it's got a blue bias in there, and then we've got like a little orangey yellow moment in the eyes. So it's kind of like a bluey purple, orangey yellow. It's obviously a very simplistic version. There's not much of the complementary color, but I do feel like it pops. I feel like I could just do this color scheme forever with sea life because it's so easy, you know, just blue for the water and then orange for whatever else. So here we have a little clownfish, a little Nemo, very, very cute. And of course, some amazing contrast as well with the black and the white. I love this eagle. We have the yellow of the beak contrasting with the purple in the background. And you know, these are two quite intensely used colors and it still works. One of them is in such a small proportion, but I also did add a lot of blooms in the background as well. And what I also like to do, and it's very subtle, you'll see in another painting, is I'll use a really subtle hint of purple in the shadows as well. Here we have red and green, a little red panda, but it's not like a very, you know, it's not a super saturated red all over the animal. We've got, you know, highlighted area here. The shadows are definitely deeper red, but then there's not a whole bunch of green to fight with that either. Really concentrated green here for the leaves that it's eating, and then just a little subtle splash in the background. A classic blue and orange here with the kingfisher. And so here is the subtlety I was referring to. So we've got some yellow on the crest of the cockatoo and also the cheeks and a little bit just on the head. And then a purple mixture for the beak instead of just straight black, and purple infused in these shadows as well, even a little bit of yellow as well. So sometimes it's not really obvious that you're going for any particular color scheme, but instead of just painting these features flat black, it gives us the chance to play up the way that those colors work together. A more intense red and green, but I've tried to break some of that intensity up here by not having the green so punchy in, you know, the whole leaf, keeping a little bit highlighted, and we have the highlights on the ladybug as well. Another yellow and purple combination, and even the black as well has a more purple bias to it. And now here's a bit of a crazy one. So I went through a phase a year or so ago where I just wanted to paint things the wrong colors. So here we've got a little Vizsla that I painted green, and I used a reddy pinky color to be the eyes and the nose, just to work with those complementary colors. And then what we also did was just a few thumbnail sketches before we decided on that color scheme and just played around. So we've got here just a value study, monochromatic, played around here with the color scheme that we eventually went with of the green and the red contrasting eyes. But then here, you know, what could we have done if we wanted to change that up and go purple and yellow? We could use purple for the shadows and yellow for the highlighted regions, or we could use yellow for the eyes and nose, similar to what we did here, and purple for all of the fur, and then more yellow in the background. So here we have split complementary when we've got a color and we go across the color wheel and use the two on either sides of the complement. So here we've got our kind of dirty dark blue color, and across we go with a yellow and an orange. I mean, you could just say that this is complementary. It's not super duper split, but you know, it's just a really great way to tie colors in together. So have a think about what you want to do for, you know, something like a shadow to ground your painting, or you know, just a bit of a background. If you've got a particular color you have to go with because that is the color of the thing, think about how you can incorporate its complement or its split complements to really enhance that painting. So I definitely could have gone with a purple color here as well to play off all of the yellow, but because the little orange feet were touching it, I thought maybe something more blue looking would be better. With our little peacock here as well, we are using an orange, but then going heavy on the colors on the other side of the wheel to it, the blues and the greens. And I think that the orange just really adds a nice pop to that. And now for something a little bit crazy, this is from my painting things the wrong color moment. We've got this beautiful blue violet and this kind of red violet, so leaving the violet in the middle, and then across from that we've got our yellowy orange color for the eyes. So nice split complementary palette here. I adore this painting. It was just something really fun to try about how you can still make something look like a dog, you know, get all the shading and everything correct, but all the colors are just out of whack. Now here's another big pile of paintings that I've got, and this is Analogous colors. So here we could draw that up to, you know, almost half the color wheel on this one. We've got you know, oranges and yellows, and then, you know, these lemony limey greens, and then greens, and then we go into blue greens and blues, and even violet. Like, it's almost a rainbow at this point. Obviously, bit of fun shimmer in there as well, but utilizing colors that are all next to each other on the wheel. We then have just a simple little frog here with some blues and greens next to each other on the wheel. I absolutely love this octopus, and this is utilizing almost like the opposite side of the color wheel from the hummingbird, where we've got our oranges and then our reds and then our violets and then our blues. A much more simplistic one here of just really like 2 colors, but we've got some pinks and purples working together. And here's some yellows and oranges and reds for our little foxy friend. Now you can also have analogous complementary, which is like on one side you've got a few colors that are analogous and next to each other, and then opposite a complement on the other side. This one maybe not so much, but it didn't feel like it fit exactly into complementary because there are a few different shades of blue here. But we've got kind of like our blue violet deep blue, and then our regular blue opposite our orange on the other side. And then this is a much better example of that. We've got our little rooster here. We've got the really intense blue, and then on the other side we have all of the analogous colors, the yellows, the oranges, and the reds. The best example I could find of a triadic scheme was this little mandrill that I painted recently, where we've just got the primary colors. So, you know, we've got the triad of colors equal distances apart. Now, of course, there is a significant amount of other color in this portrait, being the brown. I guess it depends how you want to define your color schemes, and whether to you a color scheme is only the colors that you've selected, or whether you don't mind them just being part of a portrait and having others around it. But for me anyway, I don't mind that there are other colors involved in here, and of course, because I'm using a limited palette, they all come from the same 3 anyway. And basically, if you're painting from nature anyway and you're not kind of making up the colors that you're using, you can't really go wrong. You're painting things that are natural. This is what they look like in the real world. It's going to be harmonious. But that doesn't mean you can't have fun by changing up the color scheme completely, or playing up color schemes in the shadows and the biases of the other colors. And of course, you could just go totally rainbow. So this is just a fun rainbow staffy piece I created for a workshop, because it's really hard to finish a fully realistic portrait in like an hour and a half. And I wanted to incorporate all the colors of the color wheel. So what you want to think about though is just the placement of those, and making sure you're not going to have any that run into each other that will neutralize each other. So being careful with the placement of your complementaries. So I very much kind of kept one half of the wheel to the head and another to the body. You can of course just wait for layers to dry before you put the colors down to stop them bleeding and mixing. And you know, to play off the blue on the face, I made the eyes orange. So thinking a little bit about color schemes, but you can definitely inject every color into something and make it really fun. I hope this video helped you understand how you can better utilize your color wheel to figure out what colors to use in your portrait. And don't forget to check out my video on how to create a color wheel from primary colors if you're not sure how. I'll catch you in the next one.